Hi, I'm Lieutenant Vicki Rand. I am a student here in the warfare class. I will graduate the warfare class in mid-December, and then in January report to a Collins class submarine for about a year and a half. I had a sonar tech on my boat who actually did this program a couple years back, and he raved about it, and then my captain went underway a couple times on Perisher and I think a Collins class for a couple weeks. So he never fully did the exchange program, but he talked about it, and then it came up on my slate when I was getting ready to transition from my submarine to my shore tour. And so it came up on the slate, and then I talked to my sonar tech and my captain about it a lot, and then picked it, and they picked me, so. So I graduated from the academy in 2015, and then I went through the nuclear pipeline and made it to my boat, the USS Michigan Gold Crew, in the end of November of 2016. And I spent just over 2.5, somewhere between 2.5 and 3 years on the boat. I was reactor controls assistant initially, and then the second half of my tour, I was the assistant weapons officer. So my submarine was one of the first that had female officers on board, and then we were actually the first boat to go underway with female enlisted as well. And it's been a couple years for female officers, pretty standard now. We were one of the first, so I think back in 2011, I think was the first year that they allowed women on submarines. And then I think 2016 was when they first allowed female enlisted on the boat. So I have never experienced a submarine without enlisted females on board, which I think is pretty cool. So I'm in Australia for around 2 years. I can extend. I think that's what my predecessor, Lieutenant Joe Patraz, has done. He extended, but I'm in warfare course for 5 months, and then report to a Collins class submarine for about a year and a half, and then a little over if I choose to stay a little longer. So it's about a 2-year tour. It didn't really occur to me. Maybe that's just naive of me, or just me accepting that like it shouldn't be weird that women have the exact opportunities that men do, but it never really clicked in my brain, I guess, until I got out here and somebody had said it to me like, oh, you're the first female to get this tour, which I guess makes sense because it doesn't come up on every slate. But I don't know, it's the less of an event in Australia solely because they've had women integrated for so long. We actually just celebrated their 20 years of female in submarines, which was a very cool celebration. But yeah, the Australians don't care at all. It's like a non-event for them. And I think the Americans are just very excited that we're really starting to like fully integrate women more. So it's been pretty cool. The hardest part for me has been thinking that I speak English and learning that I speak American and they speak Australian. And the things like in control, you know, like when I'm under, or, you know, when we're in the simulator practicing being underway and when we're trying to give commands to drive the submarine, I know what they're saying when they say things, and I know what I want to say, and then I'll say it in American, and everyone will kind of chuckle at me because they fully understand what I'm telling them to do, but they're like, that's not how we say it here. And so it's been fun having to learn something, but it's also just been probably the hardest part of like, oh crap, you're right, you don't say it like this. So it's been a learning curve, to say the least. So I haven't been underway yet, so I haven't experienced how they operate underway, but they do get a lot of simulator time. Their Navy's not as large as the American Navy is, like their submarine force isn't as large, which on the downside is it's not as large, but on the upside, they have more time and more, you know, resources to allocate to people because they have 2 simulators and not nearly as many people, so they can get more people into the simulator to practice and to learn the skills and to, you know, go over the things that they need to go. So I would say like the simulator phase has been very effective. There's a lot of abilities to stop and have training moments of, hey, we're gonna pause the simulation for a minute, we're gonna kind of debrief and hot wash what we just went over, what just happened, and then, you know, all right, we're gonna try that again, or we're gonna continue the scenario going now that you know a little more data. So I would say like simulation-wise, it's been fantastic, absolutely great for me. And I think the other kids in my warfare class, the other students in the warfare class really are benefiting from it as well. I would say I did not take up as many opportunities as I could have at the academy. There were so many overseas study abroad, and they have like exchange programs. And so I think I could have prepared myself better, but you know, I enjoyed the 4 years that I spent there instead of exchange program, which is also fine. But they definitely do a very good job of culture, you know, like showing other cultures and getting other navies to come in and talk to us. And so I think even without doing any overseas exchange programs, like the Academy really did train all of us to accept that like the American Navy is not the only Navy that exists in the world. So I think it really helps with just understanding tactics, because not only do I learn the Australian tactics and how they operate as a sub-force and how they operate as a diesel boat force, but it also helps them understand the American tactics, because at least the way that I learn things is kind of by comparison. And so I've had to, you know, say, okay, well, in the American tactics, we do this. And then they can say, oh, okay, I understand what you're saying, but in Australia, we'll go this route or we'll do this, you know? And so it's helped, I would say both, at least students in my warfare class, they've had to kind of help me like make the connections. And so for all of us, we've kind of learned the difference in tactics. And then I would say it also just helps understanding like the difference between diesel boats and like nuclear powered boats and how they operate, which has also been very good for me, because I never really understood how often diesel boats had to go to periscope depth to snort or anything like that. So the submarines are supposed to be and generally go undetected, you know, so nobody really knows where we are. And so we can be put in places where people might not expect us to be. And so it's just kind of that like surprise element of, you know, like to me, it's no one ever knows where we truly are because we're underwater and they literally cannot see us. And so it's just that like we're the unknown element in any kind of war fighting. So it just keeps, you know, the maritime warfare to a like, hey, watch yourself, like there is a submarine out there somewhere, you don't know where they are. So I would say that's kind of the submarine tactic. It's been fantastic. Obviously moving anywhere by yourself is a little lonely just because you go home and sometimes you just have that night of like, oh, I'm here by myself. But for the most part, I would say the Americans have a very good like bond and family out here. So I've, you know, been able to spend time in the weekends or in, you know, the evenings going to get dinner or to trivia or just any of those like normal things with the American group. But also my warfare class has been absolutely amazing. And they've introduced me to most of the submarine force, and the submarine force, you know, most of the officers in the submarine force have been so welcoming and you know, just want to make sure that at least me, like I feel welcomed. And so I've never really felt like I've been out here alone because I've had people that I can call, and you know, like American, Australian, both have just been so fantastic. So, yeah. I think it has definitely given me a lot of respect for what other countries and other navies do. You know, sometimes you kind of get like sucked into the bubble of like, this is what I'm doing, this is what we do, this is all that happens, and instead it's like learning how another navy gets trained and learning how they operate and just learning like what their focuses on, you know, what their focuses are and how they go about theirs. And I would say like just seeing, you know, like to hear from another nation that like America is very risk mitigating. And to me, that's how I, you know, was always trained, and that's how I grew up in the Navy. And then to come out here and see like they take, you know, they see different things in a different way and to be like, wow, you know, maybe we could be a little more out there, you know, and go for a little more instead of like holding back so much, or, you know, like, hey, the way we actually do this, I think is good. And I've seen like, and I can say that because I've seen the other side. And so it's really helped kind of have me, you know, like the old walk a mile in someone else's shoes. Like I am literally doing that right now. And I think that is, you know, just the most professional development you could ever get, is just seeing literally how another country and another nation and another class type, you know, diesel versus nuclear operates. So it's been great. So I don't fully know, I haven't yet been underway, but right now I would say they're much better at just being able to manage operating their periscopes and maintaining the boat at periscope depth so they can use all their sensors, and they have very good understanding of all of like the periscope tactics that submariners do. I would say that has been at least from my experience, they are very more skilled, like significantly much more skilled on the periscope than I would say I was trained. So that's been very interesting. They do a lot of periscope depth, and we tend to stay submerged, which also kind of plays on the sensors that we have on the boat, vice the sensors that they have on their submarine. But they're much more quiet as well. The diesel boats just tend to be, once they're not on the periscope depth, not running their diesels and they're just submerged, they are more quiet than American submarines are, the nuclear submarines. So that's also been very interesting.